Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another video. Today we are trying our very first podcast, reviewing the very first Mandalorian episode. So today I got a guest appearance with my wife, Sarah.
Hi.
And she's going to be giving her thoughts and opinions about the episode along with us. So let's start talking Mandalorian. So just to kick it off, what were kind of some of your initial thoughts of the episode after watching it?
I thought it was pretty cool. It definitely, I think, was worth the hype. We'd been looking forward to this for, what was it, over a year?
Yes, because Mandalorian Season 1, I believe, started in September last year. So this one started pretty much in November. So
Yeah, just about. So, I mean, it was a long time coming, and I definitely think it was worth the watch. It was very cool. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. It kind of gave me the same vibe as the first episode, like the first episode from Season 1. There were a lot of things that seemed to relate as far as the opening, like what Mando did, just the different things that kind of gave us the first impression of who the Mandalorian was in Season 1. A lot of those things carried over into Season 2 for the first episode. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I thought it was definitely well worth the wait. It was a very cool episode, and although we had to wait quite a while to see it, even during the first day, it was totally worth it, and we can't wait for the second one. But let's get on with talking about the actual episode. So this episode opens up. It was a dark shot, and it just kind of opened up with Mando walking towards the screen, and he is on a quest searching for who does this child belong to, who is his people, who is its kind, and he's kind of on a search for who these people are, and he kind of gets a tip that there's somebody on this planet that he's at. They have heard of someone else that's a Mandalorian on a nearby planet, and so he's kind of going to see who this person is and kind of see if he can get any more information. So he arrives at this place, and the guy is meeting him at a fight club, and some trouble starts to occur. What happens?
Well, we knew kind of from the preview of this episode that there was going to be a little bit of back and forth, but what we didn't realize was that there was going to be this other guy was kind of wanting him to bet on one of the two fighters, and Mando didn't really want to bet because he's not the betting type. And what turns out is that the guy that's trying to get him to bet winds up shooting one of the fighters, so clearly he was going to win this bet no matter what. So that was just kind of an initial shock surprise, just to kind of get the action going.
Yeah, we kind of find out that what he was actually asking about betting was like betting on his life, because as soon as he shoots that guy in the ring, he actually turns everything on Mando, so a bunch of guns end up in Mando's face right away. And we get kind of a callback to Season 1 really quickly, because just like in Season 1 before, Mando is super outgunned, but he also has this little thing on his wrist. I forget what it's called. I think it's like the Bird Seeker or something.
Yes, birds something.
Yeah, we kind of forgot what it was called, but basically it's this thing on his wrist, and he kind of like figures out who's the bad guys, and when he launches it, they kind of go in all random directions and kill a bunch of people. And our child hits the little button, as you see in the trailer, and hides himself so that he doesn't get hurt. But before we know it, everybody is taken out, except for the guy that Mando went there to meet, because he still needs the information that he went there for. So this guy realizes that Mando, is clever and can kill people really quickly, so he kind of takes off trying to run away from Mando, but Mando takes off after him. And this is where I was talking about, we kind of get that call back to Season 1, because in Season 1, in the opening scene when we meet Mando, he uses his little wire shooter thing that he uses to tangle people up with, In the season 1, he used it to pull back somebody and they severed him in half in the door. But in this one, he uses it to catch the guy running away, and he ties him up on a light post and basically ends up getting his information. And then Mando says he won't kill this guy himself, but what does he do?
He says you won't die by my hand, but this guy's dangling from his feet from this light post. And it's really dark, and it almost kind of gives you that interrogation vibe, like really classic interrogator room. But they're outside, and so he shoots the light out after he gets his information. And then all of a sudden you just see all these red eyes start to swarm the guy, and you know it's not good for him.
Yeah, because these creatures were actually in the beginning of the episode as well, when he first walked into town, and he kind of noticed that these creatures didn't like the light. So when he put this guy up on a light post, he shot the light out, and they came together and took him out. Because it kind of seemed like they wanted to get Mando in the beginning, but because he was in all light, they couldn't get him. So Mando finds out from this guy that there's somebody on Tatooine that has Mandalorian armor, and all of us that have followed Star Wars for many years, we know that the last one that we remember, outside of Mandalorian, is that the last one that was on there was Boba Fett. So everybody's thinking, oh, are we going to see Boba Fett? Well, he hops in his ship and he takes off for Tatooine, and he lands where he landed in season 1, the little space outpost, and we see the same lady that we met in season 1. Her name is Peli Motto. And what did Peli have, Sarah? What was kind of cool there?
She wound up having R5, which was really cool to see him again. Kind of, for me, it was somebody that, or was a droid that looked familiar, but I wasn't quite sure, and so Jeremy had to help me out there. R5 was the droid that Luke almost got from the Jawas way back in
A New Hope.
But that droid was rather junky, and so he wound up getting R2 instead, right, with C-3PO. But now Pelimoto has R5, and he's just as junky and clunky as he was before, and very slow with his movement. And she wanted him to pull up a map, and he just took his sweet time getting that map pulled up.
Yeah, and when she pulled up this map, she was kind of telling Mando, her thoughts on where this potential Mandalorian could be, and she was kind of talking about this city that wasn't really on the map, because she was like pointing at it, and he was like, where is it? Because she pointed out Mos Espa and Mos Eisley, which is all of the places that are more familiar to us from previous Star Wars things. But this new one is Mos Pelgo, which is kind of like a city that's, I would say, not...
It's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's not very popular. It's got a very, very small population. Not very many people go there. So Mando decides to take off. He does take the child with him along for the ride, because he does not want the child to be separated from him. While he's gone, Pelimoto is going to have her pit droids try to take care of Mando's ship and repair some things, even though they kind of had a little issues there, as we saw in the episode. So he takes off. He goes to Mos Pelgo. Mando arrives there, and there's kind of this different feeling about when he's entering. You mentioned...
It was very Western.
Yeah.
We've kind of had that vibe before with different ones. In the last time he was here, how there was that other bounty hunter want-to-be, if you will. And there was very much kind of a cowboys and guns vibe then, and so we kind of got a call back to that.
Yeah. Star Wars was kind of like supposed to be a space western back then, so it kind of really brought on the feel of being a western for this show. And so Mando eventually arrives. He goes in what looks like, the cantina bar. It's not the cantina bar that we all know of, but it's the cantina for this little city. And there's really hardly anybody around. Goes up to the bartender and is kind of trying to figure out who's the one in the Mandalorian armor. And he says basically like, oh, why don't you look over there? And there's this guy standing in the doorway, and something was kind of off about him.
To me, it just looked like a very skinny, scrawny guy in this Mandalorian armor. It did not look like it fit him at all. It almost kind of reminded me of, like, you know, when a child is trying on their parents' clothes and they're just way too big.
Yeah, exactly. But what was kind of striking about it was that he was wearing armor that looked like it could have been Boba Fett's armor. Some of the noteworthy things to point out is obviously the color. The color matched pretty well. On the forehead of the helmet, there's the exact same dent that Boba Fett had in his helmet. And the armor itself just kind of looked like it was a little bit disintegrated / worn in a way that maybe when Boba was in the Sarlacc's stomach, some of the acid ate away at some of the armor. But
some of that would be expected too, living in a sand village.
Yeah. And eventually the Jawas are noted to be the ones that found the armor. So somehow that armor was released from the Sarlacc. We don't know exactly how yet. We just basically know that it was found. But there's two potential things. It either threw it up or Boba Fett got out. And we don't know which one is which yet, unfortunately. But Mando meets this, what he's called the Marshal of the town there. And they kind of have a little bit of a back and forth. And eventually they're interrupted. What are they interrupted by?
Well, the Marshal is the one that's wearing the armor.
Yeah.
So that's important to note. But they're interrupted by this giant sand creature. Just the earth starts shaking, and all of a sudden you see this big ripple in the sand go through kind of the one street of town there.
It kind of resembled, if you know about the movie Tremors, it was like this creature under the ground, kind of swooping right through the middle of town. It kind of looked like it was like slug or serpent-like as it went through there. But it didn't do a whole lot. It just kind of spread fear amongst everybody. Like, people were running into their houses and everything and trying to avoid this thing. And what we eventually find out what it is it's called a crate dragon. And it's exactly, you know, the same premise as Tremors, basically. It's like, you know, when this thing either hears or kind of feels vibrations in the earth, it feels like that's where food is, so it just lunges out of the ground and then takes whatever is there. But Mando kind of gets his first glimpse of what this thing is, and he realizes that it's a problem, and so he kind of makes a deal with the Marshal, and the deal was, hey, if you help us take out the crate dragon, I will give you back your armor, because the Marshal knows that this armor is sacred to the Mandalorians, because, you know, they're their own culture. This is a part of their culture.
And this kind of reminds me a lot of the episode from season 1, where it was his first attempt to kind of hide the child in this little town. In that town, it was a lot more like foresty and swamp-like, but he went there and they had a problem of the chicken walkers, right? Where they needed help taking care of those. And again, it was a small little town. Nobody really goes there outside of the people that live there. And it was a lot the same for this episode, just different terrain of small little town. Nobody really goes there unless you live there already. Hey, we have this giant alien thing or whatever, the crate dragon, terrorizing the town, and can you help us get rid of it? So I thought that was pretty cool that it's not the exact same. It was definitely a different vibe to it, but I thought that was cool how they kind of... It's almost like the same formula, but it was really cool.
Yeah, and they also, for those of you that have played Knights of the Old Republic in the past, there was actually a mission where you had to take on a crate dragon as well. Mm-hmm. And also in another game, Star Wars Jedi Academy, there's a mission where you're trying to like hop between different places and that you encounter the crate dragon as well. So it's kind of like taking an idea from the previous season, as Sarah was saying, and kind of adding this other Star Wars lore / twist to it, which is kind of nice, especially since both episodes worked really well. But when he was moving on, they made this deal. basically the Mando and the Marshal take off because Mando needs to know, hey, where does this thing live? Where does it stay? And there's kind of like a little Easter egg kind of thrown in there because we see that Mando is on a swoop bike, but the Marshal is on what looks like Anakin's pod racer engine, just modified because obviously the way he's sitting, he doesn't want the engine blowing in his face. But it's kind of one of those things where if it looks like it and it sounds like it, there's a good chance that it is it, but we just don't know 100%. There were a couple of different modifications to it that made it so it wasn't exactly like it, but it's like, where in the world are you going to get those exact looking parts all in one piece?
Especially after so much time had passed,
Yeah.
To be able to modify it to be a single standalone piece.
Yeah, it kind of makes us wonder what that pod racer has been up to all these years. So Mando finds out where this thing lives. He actually finds out also from the Tusken Raiders that this beast is very interested in banthas. So they do eat banthas. They do eat the Tusken Raiders because we see one unfortunate Tusken Raider get eaten as they're showing Mando what this thing can do and the size of it.
And they were trying to demonstrate that they feed it banthas because if it eats, it'll most likely sleep longer.
Yeah.
Which means just a little bit longer of peace. And that's right when, instead of eating the bantha bait, the Krayt Dragon went straight for the Tusken Raider that brought it there, which was very unfortunate for the Tusken Raider.
Yeah, I kind of thought it would have been smarter for the Tusken to run so that the bantha was in line with him, and then he could have ran back, but apparently Tusken Raiders aren't that smart.
And the Krayt Dragon's so big that even if he did do that, I can totally see him just eating both of them.
Yeah, it was quite massive, huge. So after that, they figure out that the Tusken Raiders and the citizens of Mos Pelgo both have the same issue. They both want this thing gone. So Mando unites them together and says, we can't take this on just one or the other. Like the Tusken Raiders can't do it themselves. The citizens of Mos Pelgo can't do it themselves. Maybe we can do something together. And so they work things out. It's kind of a little bit of an iffy relationship at first as we see the Marshal kind of getting in the face of the Tusken Raiders. But Mando calms him down quite a bit, and then they figure out, hey, we can take a shot at this.
The language barrier definitely was difficult for those citizens of Mos Pelgo to overcome, just because they're used to them being raiders, right? I mean, they're Tusken Raiders.
Yeah, and Mando's the only one that can speak both languages, so he's working as the translator for everybody, which is kind of funny to see him do that. Like We've always seen Tusken Raiders making their weird noises and calls, but now to see a human person doing that, it's kind of adds a little bit of a comic.
It was pretty interesting to see.
So they band together, and kind of like the climax of this episode is when they're preparing to attack this thing for one final battle. And we're seeing the people put these big explosives in the ground. Their hope is that eventually this thing will lunge out of the cave and then lay right on top of the explosives, and then they can blow it up, and hopefully it will kill this thing.
Because we learned that the weak point of this Krayt Dragon is his belly, so they're hoping to get him out far enough of his cave so that they can blow up the belly portion of him.
Right, and they also have a couple of different weapons as well. They had I forget what they're called, but they're big versions of crossbows. I think they're called ballistas, maybe. But basically, they launch it, and it's got a big bolt attached to a rope, so that they launch a bunch of these. I think there was 4 or 5 that went into the dragon, so they can try to pull it and put it over the explosives, but they find out that's pretty ineffective really quickly.
The Krayt Dragon definitely is a lot stronger than even, maybe 10 of them that were holding onto these ropes.
Yeah, and there was quite the back and forth between the two as well. At times it seemed like the people had the upper hand. There was times where it seemed like the The Krayt Dragon had the upper hand, but where it really boiled down to was eventually the Krayt Dragon did land on the explosives. And the explosives went off, they set them off with a detonator, and it didn't go according to plan.
It wasn't enough. The Krayt Dragon was just way stronger. So after having all these explosions on his belly, he kind of retracted, and you don't really know what's going on. You just know all of a sudden he's gone. And then, he retracted into his cave, which is on this giant hill, and we see him come out of the top of the hill almost like a volcano exploding.
Yeah, and to a point, I think you were mentioning before that it kind of seemed like it almost looked like there were two of them because it was coming out of so many different areas and so quickly.
Right, yeah.
The Mandalorian and the Marshal did take it upon themselves to use their jetpacks to fly up to the higher area to try to basically tease it, so to speak. Like, they kept shooting it. Nothing was really happening, but they were trying to get the thing to follow them. And the Krayt Dragon eventually came down, and Mandalorian thought of one final thing that he could possibly do. What did he do?
Well, they had this bantha down there with all the explosives on it, kind of as like a backup plan if the ones buried underground weren't enough. And so he winds up luring the Krayt Dragon to eat the bantha, but it's at the same time that he eats Mando. And the Marshal doesn't really know what's going on. He just told the Marshal to get out of the way before this happened, and so nobody really knows what's going on except for Mando.
Yeah,
and we see Mando get eaten.
He also told the Marshal to take care of the child, like, just in case he dies.
Yeah, so everybody sees Mando get eaten, and they think, it's over, like, we're done for. And the Krayt Dragon went back into the ground with Mando still inside. And all of a sudden, the Krayt Dragon comes back up out of the ground, and you see Mando basically spit out of the Krayt Dragon with his, what do you call that? It's almost like, it's his giant taser gun, if you will.
Yeah, he was shocking the Krayt Dragon from the inside so that it would basically open up its mouth and try to regurgitate him out of there.
But luckily the bantha was still inside, so as he jetpacks out of there with his giant taser gun, that's when he hits the button on the detonator to blow up the bantha.
Yeah, so that was the way that they end up killing the Krayt Dragon, is that final explosion with the bantha. Rest in peace, bantha. Everybody was happy. They were ecstatic that the thing was gone and nobody had to worry about it anymore. So the Marshal kept his word, and he gave the Mandalorian the armor, and Mandalorian basically takes off into the sun and goes across the desert. And there's one last little teaser that we had at the end of the episode.
Well, there was something before that too that I don't know if it would lead to anything, but part of the deal between the Tusken Raiders and the people of Mos Espa was, if we take this thing down together, the Tusken Raiders can have whatever they can manage to get from the Krayt Dragon. And so we see them bring out this giant pearl, and it looks like probably a little bit bigger than a bowling ball of a pearl.
Yeah,
so I don't know if maybe that was like an egg of some sort, or just a pearl prize that's worth a lot of money. We don't really know what it is.
Yeah, they also chopped it up for a bunch of meat as well.
Yep.
Like, Mandalorian took a chunk probably the size of, I don't know, if he were to curl up in the fetal position, about that size. It was huge.
About the size of a briefcase, I'd say.
Yeah.
Or a piece of luggage. So everybody's got their share of the meat.
Yeah.
But...
And then, then he takes off, and we see, like, he kind of takes off. He's kind of like in the background of the shot, and as the shot's coming across, we see this figure kind of watching him go away. And we do get a little brief snippet of what he looked like, because he turned around and walked towards the camera.
It was really quick.
Yeah, it was super quick. Like, you only got a couple seconds. And it kind of appeared that he looked a little familiar. He didn't look strikingly familiar, just a little bit. And so what I thought was, okay, maybe this is Boba. If it's not Boba, who could it be? So what I did outside of the episode is I went online and I looked up Internet Movie Database. And on there, for that episode, Tamura, who is from episode 2, he played Jango, and we all know that Jango was the one that had all the clones based off of. So he was in the episode. So that means one of two things. That was either Boba or it was another clone. And what's interesting about this, so if it's Boba, awesome, we got Boba back in the show. If it's not Boba, let's say it's Captain Rex. He was from the Clone Wars and a very close friend of Ahsoka Tano. Mm-hmm. So that could lead to Ahsoka being involved in this series. We don't know yet, but that's a possibility. But yeah, that was the closing shot of the episode. So we're going to kind of move on to our final thoughts and some ratings. So Sarah, what are kind of your final thoughts of the episode?
So my final thoughts were just, again, very, very cool episode. Well worth the wait. Kind of like when he went to that other village in the jungle where he had to fight off the chicken walker with the town and help them learn how to battle this chicken walker, except, in the sand, and dealing with this crate dragon. The crate dragon kind of reminded me of the worm from the episode of SpongeBob where they had the giant worm terrorizing the town. So that was kind of funny to me. I thought it was neat how the Marshal, he looked so scrawny in this armor, like you didn't think he was going to be a really good fighter, but he actually was kind of, he did a really good job fighting. He at least knew what he was doing. A little bit of a hot temper, especially with the Tusken Raiders. But besides that, it was a pretty good episode. I liked it. The child was not super involved. He kind of, besides that first instance in the fight club where he hit the button to hide himself, you kind of just saw little bits and pieces of him. So he definitely wasn't the focus of this episode, but overall I thought it was cool that they focused more on the Mando, especially with it being the first episode of the season.
Yeah, I kind of had some similar thoughts too. I thought it was cool, kind of going off what you said on the end there. It was something, they basically took what we really enjoyed from Mandalorian Season 1, and then they went back to somewhere familiar, being Tatooine, but they showed us something new on screen. Both the town was completely new, and we hadn't seen crate dragons on screen as far as I know, so it was kind of cool to see that involved as well. We got little snippets of different Easter eggs that, could it be the real thing? Could it not? The only one that we know for sure, I believe, is R5, to be the 100% sure coming off of this episode of what it was. But I also agree about the child. I kind of felt like I wish he was left on the ship when they got to Tatooine, kind of like what he did the first time when he went there, because it was almost like Mando's doing some cool things. Here's him in the background. Mando's doing some cool things. Here's him in the background. And it didn't really add much to the story for him to be there.
I kept waiting for him to use his force power, like when he helped Mando with the rhino, when he was trying to get that rhino egg.
Yeah, and he really didn't do anything. A couple times he, moved his ears and whatnot, but that's about it. he didn't...
He was there to look cute.
Yeah, he didn't even... But even though he was there to look cute, he didn't even do anything that was cute, like when he was sipping the broth from the season 1. Like, there wasn't really anything where it was, like, cut to the child and it was hilarious. Outside of the very beginning when he closed the egg compartment thing that he hangs out in. That part was funny, but to be fair, that was in the trailer, so we already kind of knew about that. There was nothing that was a shock factor. And it was
within the first 10 minutes or so it wasn't it wasn't like it was in the middle of the episode. It was right away.
Exactly. So the rest of the way, there really wasn't anything going for the child. Maybe in episodes to come. We'll have to wait and see.
Yep.
So, final verdict on rating. What would you rate the episode?
Out of 10, I feel like I'd have to give it probably a 10, if not a 9.5 or a 10. There really wasn't much that I would change. It seemed to keep my attention the entire time. I didn't feel disappointed after having to wait so long for the episode. It was definitely action-packed and exciting, and so yeah, I'd have to give it probably around a 9.5 or a 10.
Yeah, I actually thought the exact same thing. And just to keep in mind, like, we're doing these podcasts for the very first time. We're doing rating systems. There are episodes in season 1 that would not get a 10, like, by far. So just because we're coming right out the gate saying that these are 10 out of 10s, we truly mean that. Like, the first episode was super engaging. I don't think there was really a dull moment ever.
Yeah.
Again, I did mention that the child kind of like broke things up a little oddly, but that really isn't something to take away from the overall episode. It wasn't enough to be distracting where I'm like, oh geez. So it was a great episode, a great start to the season, and I really cannot wait for the rest of them.
I feel like there was enough new things to look at too that definitely helped too. Just aside from constant action, to always have new things to look at and a glimpse at a new town. What would you give it out of 10?
Oh, I'd give it a 10. It's definitely a 10 out of 10. I think it, to your point, possibly a 9.5. I think I'm going to keep it at a 10. Moving forward, we'll see how these episodes play out. We'll keep giving ratings, and hopefully that they will all, stay at that 10 out of 10 range. If not, hopefully at 9. We don't want to sink any lower than that. But otherwise, that about wraps up our first podcast episode that talks about Mandalorian. So that was episode 1 for The Mandalorian. We will be back here next week with another episode to talk about episode 2. So stay tuned for that. But as always, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, drop us a like. If you have any suggestions for during the podcast or things that you liked, let us know what you liked in the comments section. We'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.